Good evening, Thousand Oaks. This is January 11, 2021. It's time for the Planning Commission meeting. You'll notice that all of the commissioners are appearing via video conference under Zoom at this point to try to improve our social distancing. I believe this is also what will happen for the City Council meeting tomorrow. With that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now go to item 3, the roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Buss?
Present.
Commissioner Cohan?
Here.
Commissioner McMahon?
Here.
Commissioner Newman? Absent. Chair Lanson?
And present. Item 4, written comments, announcements, supplements, and continuances. Mr. Kearns?
Thank you, Chair. We did have a supplemental that was prepared and sent out to commissioners this afternoon that contained one email correspondence against the project before you tonight. And subsequent to that, another email was forwarded to the planning commissioners, and that email a position of support for the project. That's all I have at this point.
Thank you. Number 5, public comments. I don't believe we have any general public comments. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
That's correct.
Okay. We'll go on to item 6, which is the consent calendar. We have the one matter, which is the minutes from our December 14th meeting. Do I have any comments or a motion with regard to the consent calendar?
I'll defer to you.
I was just going to move that we accept the minutes as written into our agenda.
Very well. Please prepare us for a vote.
Commissioner Buss?
Aye.
Commissioner Cohan?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Chair Lanson?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Very good. So go on to item 7 and 7A. Please open the public hearing.
Continued hearing, having been advertised as required by law, is hereby open to consider Agenda Item 7A, Development Permit DP 2020-70307 to allow construction of an 850 square foot drive-through dining establishment with outdoor patio, 14 vehicle parking spaces, trash enclosure, and associated grading, landscaping, and hardscaping, including 2 development standard waivers: 1, setback reduction, and 2, reduced landscape buffer setback, located at 2198 North Moore Park Road, Assessor's Parcel Number 675-0-374-265. The applicant is Megdal & Associates. This item is continued from December 14th, 2020.
Thank you. I think we have Associate Planner Don Nielsen to present. You're muted. Don, you have to unmute.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair Lanson, members of the Planning Commission. To my knowledge, we're still trying to get one of the applicant members logged into Zoom for this. In the meantime, do we want to wait, Chair Lanson, or should we just go ahead and move forward with the presentation?
I think go ahead. I'm assuming the person that's going to speak is well aware of the presentation you're going to make.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair Lanson, members of the Planning Commission, members of the public. The project tonight is located at 2198 North Moore Park Road. It's in order to a proposal to construct a new 850 square foot drive-through dining establishment with outdoor seating and a patio with a trellis. There's also going to be associated hardscape, landscape, and grading. This particular project also does contain 2 development standard waivers. One is a setback reduction from the 100-foot setback reduction from the center lines of the roads. And then the second one is to reduce landscape buffer setback. Now, it's because of these waivers that the project is coming before the Planning Commission tonight, in which the Planning Commission would have to approve, in order to approve the project, would also have to approve the waivers. If the project did not contain any waivers, it would be able to go through the administrative approval route per the C1 zone standards. The project, as I mentioned, is located at 2198, right at the intersection of Avenida de las Flores and North Moore Park Road. Here you can actually see the project site in the kind of the greater context of the surrounding neighborhood. And here is a zoomed in version showing the actual project site with its immediate surroundings. So commercial, other commercial, residential, and also the institutional uses. A little bit of background on the project. The earliest recorded permit that the city has is from 1970. However, we also have access to aerial images from 1967, 1968 that actually show a service station at that particular location before the permit records that we have. So that's just so that that's a clarification for the Planning Commission. But however, since that time, the site has only served as a gas station, as a service station, and that was demolished in 2005. In 2009, the site had to undergo soil remediation, and then that was completed in 2014. The current project was submitted in 2020 for a pre-application review, and then also for later for a formal review. Additionally, the project was supposed to go before the Planning Commission in December of last year. However, it was continued to today's date. Some past actions regarding this particular project site. There were some special use permits proposed for the site. It was submitted in 2018, and Planning Commission denied a special use permit in April of 2019. Again, another revision to that special use permit was submitted in 2019, which was also denied at that same time, and the City Council denied the appeal in September of 2019. But that was for a new service station and a convenience store. The proposed project is for the drive-through, which was submitted in early 2020. Now, the project, it is located on a previously disturbed 0.46 acre site that is located, that has a general plan land use designation of commerce with a C1 zone designation. The site is predominantly surrounded by residential uses with some other limited commercial uses to the north and south of it. Now, also the Thousand Oaks High School is located directly across the street. And here you can kind of see the site in its kind of the greater context that we were just mentioning. Just kind of recapping, so bringing everyone back to the project itself, it's the new 150 square foot. It has an 18 vehicle queue, so that's 18 vehicles before it starts to impact the parking stalls, and we'll be able to see, you'll see that in just a second. There are proposed 14 vehicle parking spaces, as well as the patio with the trellis. Here you can kind of see the site plan for the proposed project. The primary vehicle lane is in purple. The building is in green, and the trellis is in blue. The hours of operations for this site would be limited to 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., and that is consistent with the other existing drive-through Starbucks within the city. The patio use would be limited to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and that is consistent with the city's noise ordinance. The order box has also been located along Avenida de las Flores, so it's far enough away from the residential areas to try and limit any potential noise impacts. Additionally, there is a privacy wall along Calle Jasmine in order to try and block any potential sounds. In addition, the project is conditioned to approve. There is a condition of approval that would help to minimize any potential noise if it becomes an issue. Back to the waivers that I had mentioned previously. So the first waiver is a setback reduction. The city and the municipal code contains it's 100-foot minimum setback from the center line from any public street. So here you can actually see, let me get this. So from Moore Park Road, there is a 100-foot setback, which would bring you to this particular line. From Calle Jasmine center line, that would give you a 100-foot setback line of right here. From Avenida de las Flores, you have a 100-foot setback, which gives you right here. So approximately, if in order to actually build a building without any waivers, it'd be a 5-foot wide building down the center of the site, which you can actually see here in blue. So that's the first waiver that's being requested. The second waiver that's being requested, it's for 6-foot wall within the 10-foot landscape buffer. And right here, there is still 10 feet of landscape area. There is just a 6-foot wall in the middle of that landscape with landscaping on both sides of the wall. For this and that, the purpose of that wall is in order to try and shield and reduce any impacts to the adjacent neighbors across Calle Jasmine. Now, these waivers, they are supported because it locates the building and other and the order box away from the residential uses. It provides its substantial landscape buffers along all of the property lines. And the project, it is consistent with the design, colors, and materials of the surrounding neighborhood. It actually is able to pull in those designs and materials. Therefore, the project would be compatible with the established development pattern in the area. Moving on from that to the parking for the site, the municipal code, just based off the size of the building and the number of outdoor tables, it would only require 8 vehicle parking spaces. However, the project is proposing to have 14 vehicle parking spaces and also 18 bicycle parking spaces. Now, as part of this project, when it was initially submitted, it was a parking and vehicle queue report. In that report, it found that the parking, not the queuing, not the queue lane, the stacking lane, but the parking itself would trigger a parking demand for 4 spaces during the weekday mornings and 7 spaces during a Saturday morning. So here you can kind of get a visual of what's being proposed. From the green to the gold, that is the total of the 14 spaces, of the 14 parking spaces. The green, that is the total of the 8 parking spaces that would be required by the municipal code. According to the parking report, in the blue, those are the number of space with the green rectangles with the blue stars. That is the number of of the parking demand for a weekday morning. And then the blue plus the gold stars, that is a Saturday morning parking demand that's anticipated for this location. So the project does provide more parking than what's required by the code and what's required per these. It's called the Wood Rogers Memorandum. It's the parking and queuing report. Now, moving over to the stacking lane capacity, it's the Wood Rogers Memorandum, the parking and queuing lane report. It identified there was an industry standard of 7.1 cars per 1,000 square feet of building area. So that's the industry as a whole. Therefore, it's like taking that and applying it to this site, it would mean if we just went by the industry standards, it would only trigger 6 vehicle parking spaces. However, the report found that the average morning peak demand would be 14 vehicles. Now, this particular project, as we can see here, it provides 18 vehicle parking spaces. So in the green, you can see that's how many, that would be the vehicle queuing lane if we just went off of the industry standard. So that would be the 6. Now the report, even though it's anticipating it would only require 14 spaces as a peak demand, and so that's the green plus these blue rectangles. So that's 14 vehicle queuing spaces. The project itself is providing its 4 additional spaces within the vehicle queue before it even enters into the parking area. So you can see from the green to the gold, that's just the queue. Now there are 4 additional potential spaces, which offers a buffer, but those will then encumber the parking area, the parking stalls. So city staff, we do not count those because it would limit the use of those of the parking lot. But it does provide, it's a buffer before there's any potential spill, before the project could potentially spill out onto North Moore Park Road. Now, here we have the, moving on from the vehicle queue to the actual elevations. Here you actually see the proposed project. Within the C1 zone, buildings are allowed to go up to 25 feet with under the C1 zone standards. The proposed project is maximum at 22 feet from adjacent grade. So here you can see this is the two of the facades. The southern facade, that one faces it's the adjacent, directly adjacent property, and then the eastern facade, excuse me, that is facing out towards Moore Park Road. And then here you have the area looking north. That's the facade that'll be facing towards I'm sorry, the one looking north, that's the facade that's facing towards the adjacent property, whereas the one looking south, that's the facade that faces towards Avenida de las Flores. And then looking west, this is the facade that faces onto that interior patio, which you can actually see here. So here, this is one of the project renderings that the applicant had provided. So here you have the patio with that facade, and here's a walk-up order window that you're able to go to. Additionally, here is another conceptual rendering for the project of what it could potentially look like in its setting. One thing to note is that the project site, it will control its pedestrian access onto the site. There is, not only is there a 6-foot block wall along Calle Jasmine, but there is also, you can kind of see here in this rendering, and it is on the project plans, there is a fence that surrounds the site along Avenida de las Flores and along most of North Moore Park Road. And that's in order to prevent pedestrians from just crossing the vehicle, the queue lane, and just entering the site. So it actually will funnel all of the pedestrians into a single area, into the single pedestrian access to the site. And here you can kind of see in the conceptual landscape plan that we have here. So you have the wall that is on the eastern portion of the site, and then you have the wrought iron fence that wraps the majority of the rest of the site. And it funnels, it limits pedestrian access to the site to this area. It's an access pathway from the public right-of-way into the actual site itself. And then you have, again, the surrounding areas I mentioned before. There is substantial landscaping for this site. Now, it's a conceptual landscape plan that the applicant submitted. It will be formally, the actual landscape plan will be formally submitted to the city if the project is approved. It'll have to go through what's called a landscape plan check. That means the landscape plans are then submitted to the city. They're reviewed by by a contract landscape architect for conformance to both city standards and state regulations for particularly for water usage. And that's where they would find where there would be more detail in the actual landscape plans. Now, in terms of the conditions for approval, the project, given that it is located next to some sensitive uses, primarily it's like the residential uses, the project has been conditioned to try and protect those sensitive uses. And staff has highlighted these conditions in particular because they are all designed to try and protect those adjacent sensitive uses by capping the number of outdoor dining tables and the use of the patio use tables. All of this is designed so that they can fit within the city's municipal code and there's associated ordinances and regulations. And we can expand on these conditions if the commission has any questions on it. Now, for this particular project, in terms of outreach and public correspondence, the applicant indicated they conducted a community meeting on September 4th via Zoom. They indicated that they sent a flyer out to 75 properties and they had approximately 6 to 8 individuals in attendance. Staff has received numerous public correspondence, and you'll have to forgive me, I forgot to update the number of correspondence because it has increased since that time. There's now, I think it's approximately 4 letters in support, with the rest of the projects that are opposed to the project. In opposition, it's primarily regarding to potential increases in traffic, pedestrian access, and other existing Starbucks locations. Sorry. This project, it's also exempt from the provisions of CEQA under sections 15303 for new construction and under sections 15332 for infill development. Staff reviewed all the exceptions to the exemptions and found that none of them apply. So in conclusion, the design of the project, it meets the intent of the city standards, codes, and policies, inclusive of the requested waivers. It integrates with the surrounding neighborhood. Particularly it's the colors and materials pulling from not only adjacent commercial and residential use, but also the residential uses, and has been designed to minimize the impacts to the surrounding by first pulling the building away from those residential uses and trying to get it as close to Moore Park Road and Avenida de los Flores, as closest to those as possible. while additionally putting in it's the walls along Kaye Jasmine and the other fencing in order to try and control pedestrian and the vehicular movements on site and make those so that they're extremely predictable. Therefore, based on all of this, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve Development Permit 2020-70307, including the 2 development standard waivers based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Commissioner questions? Are there any commissioner questions? Staff?
I have some.
Commissioner McMahon, go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Currently on the property, there's an unused driveway. It goes to where the fence is. That's very close to the corner. And then there's the bigger driveway that also goes to the medical
Don,
building.
can you please stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
And I know that you plan to separate the driveway from the Starbucks and the medical building. And I was trying to understand how far apart those driveways will be. And the one that's going in there now, is that going to be shifted to the south and then a new one put in? I'm just trying to picture where that driveway, where the 2 driveways will be.
Okay, just a second. I actually have a slide that I can bring up for you. Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. So here we have, this is the existing site. You have in, let me see here. Are you able to see the laser pointer? So to the north on Avenue de los Flores, it's the driveway that you had mentioned in on Calle Jasmine. Those are the 2 driveways, and then you have an existing one. The proposed project, it would close off the driveways on Avenue de los Flores and Calle Jasmine. It would create a new driveway along Moore Park for the project site. And the current proposal, it would effectively close the existing one between the medical office building and the project site and install a new driveway. Now that portion would actually have to be an agreement between the 2 property owners that they would be for any improvements on the adjacent property's site. In Public Works, they do actually have a condition in there that the adjacent property owner, as the project is going through, they would have to, they're actively involved in any improvements, proposed improvements as a result of this particular project. So right here, you can kind of see the ideas behind the driveways.
Okay, now, so they're going to create a new driveway for the medical center?
That is correct. That would have to be as part of the project.
And how far apart will those 2 driveways be?
When we were checking, it would be approximately 50 feet between the 2.
Oh, so it's quite a bit further south then.
Correct.
Okay. My next question is the process. I see on the diagram the order board and where you order. I don't see where the customer will pick up their order.
Okay, so the customer will pick up the order. It's on the southern edge of the southwestern side of the building. So if you can see, can you see there's a little red laser dot?
I see that.
Okay, yeah, so this is where the customer would pick up the order, and they would order from here. Now, according to Starbucks, the corporate policies that they require about approximately, I think it's 5 vehicle spaces between in placing the order and where they're actually able to pick up the order itself.
Okay, so my third question is about the stacking.
Mm-hmm.
You've got cars separating to stack and get more room, and then they merge together. And so there's no purpose, and the customers are going to be maybe confused. You've got them trying to separate and then go back together with no benefit to them. I did go to the sites that I was given around town where there are separate stacking lanes that are created, and each of those sites have orders, either order takers who are out there with, electronic clipboards, or they have separate windows. And I'm just curious how that's going to work, that people are just going to move into 2 lanes and then just move back into 1 lane and for absolutely no purpose whatsoever.
So we definitely understand the concern. For this, it is, when staff was looking at this, and we did have the discussions on it, it's the merging at the end, at the northern point of the dual stacking lane. It would offer, it's a traditional merge pattern, and it would be staff's understanding that in majority of the time, you may have a couple off instances, but a majority of the time, it would just be normal merging patterns that any of the customers would just be going through. And additionally, it is this dual stacking lane. There's a couple of things with this. One, it does get the project, it increases the amount of vehicle queues, so that it could avoid any potential impacts to North Moore Park Road. So it's really trying to avoid the vehicle stackings from moving on to into the public right of way. Additionally, after doing the research, the industry has actually been moving into this direction of doing it's a dual stacking lane for even before they get to an order board, is moving into either a dual or a triple stacking lane. And there's several of the large corporations have been moving in this direction. Primarily, it's going to be Starbucks, Shake Shack, Chipotle, Panda Express. So they're starting to see more of this paradigm shift in the drive-through industry for a design that's very similar to what we have before us. Additionally, there are other locations throughout, not really within City of Thousand Oaks, but in the county, where they actually have, they've created, it's a similar design to what we have here, in which there's a dual stacking lane prior to an order box, and then they actually merge into a single file lane, and then you have the order box. So there are locations in the county that do that currently. And right now the staff is not in contact with the other locations. That has become an issue for those jurisdictions.
You don't think that if you need that extra stacking lane, you should have a secondary order position there?
So for that we'd have to default to Starbucks on that, since it would be more of a corporate decision on how they would, whether they would need a secondary order box.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Other commissioner questions of staff?
Yes, I've got a few questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Buss.
My first question, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Nielsen. It was excellent. My questions start with the hours, 11 p.m. for a drive-through. Are there any other drive-throughs in the city that operate till 11 p.m. that are within 100 feet of a residential area?
Yeah, so the city, we actually have, it's a handful of other drive-through locations that are directly adjacent to residential. In terms of Starbucks, there's one on Duesenberg and Thousand Oaks Boulevard. It has residential adjacent to it. There is a McDonald's off of Wendy Drive. It abuts, it actually shares a property line with residential. They are able to go to 11 o'clock.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. The other question, the Wood Rogers standards, were those applied to the Rancho Starbucks drive-through?
No, so at that time, I don't know everything about that. I may have to default to Mr. Kearns, but to my knowledge, the Wood Rogers, the queuing study report, those standards were not applied there. Now, one of the parts that staff, as we're going through, and we've been reviewing these, the drive-throughs that they've been coming in, we have been reviewing existing locations, so the Rancho and primarily the Rancho and the Duesenberg locations. But in terms of what type of reports were required, I will have to default to Mr. Kearns or to Ms. Nome through in Public Works.
Yeah,
Okay, so
with the Starbucks on Rancho Road, they use the industry standard prepared by Starbucks and submitted to the city based on other examples of Starbucks in the county, in the area. And they did not use an engineering firm to prepare that study.
okay. So that's why they're experiencing that issue. We don't anticipate having a similar issue on Moore Park Road.
That's correct.
Okay, copy that. Also, I had a question on the southwestern side of that property on, I think it's the medical office property. There's a riser there for utilities of some kind. Is that going to be impacted by the construction?
It could potentially be impacted by the construction. Again, that would be something that the two property owners will have to discuss if the project is approved and is able to move forward. That falls under, it's more of a private agreement between the two entities. And it just would have to be consistent with the project. That does fall under, it would be Public Works review. Brad Bussell with Public Works, he may be able to speak more on it because one of the conditions of approval that Public Works does include is basically for any modification to the adjacent property, they would have to have an agreement. There would be an agreement for any movement of those materials, but I will defer to Brad on that.
Okay. And then I have one last question, and it's the big one for me. You say that you'll need 4 parking spaces during weekdays anticipated. There's a school directly cat corner across the street. It's a high school that roughly 2,600 students attend when it's in session. Are you sure that you're just going to need 4 parking spaces at 7 a.m.?
So for that, the 4 parking spaces, that's what came out of the parking and queuing report. The report itself, it was actually generated looking at similar locations. There was one in Oxnard, one in Redlands, and the third location is escaping me. Kathy may have to help me on remembering the location, but all the other sites that they were reviewing, particularly the one in Redlands, it's a very similar circumstances for the location. It's in a high vehicle thoroughfare, very similar to what Moore Park Road is. There is an adjacent high school for that particular location in a predominantly residential area. And when they were going through and looking at all the other case study locations, that's the number that they were able to generate for the early mornings. Now, with that though, even though the report is only saying you only need 4, the site itself is providing 14. So they're 10 spaces over even a potential maximum weekday morning.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nielsen, I think you referred to Mr. Bussell to finish an answer. I thought we would give him a chance to finish.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Brad Bussell in Public Works. Yeah, that riser that you're seeing there, that's probably maybe 20, 30 feet in the site, if that's the one you're speaking of. That is a turnout for the Cayugas Municipal Water District, and that is not proposed to be moved, relocated, or touched. So it's going to be preserved where it's at.
Oh, that's a water riser. I didn't realize that. Okay. I may be remembering it incorrectly. Thank you.
It's a metering station for a water turnout.
Oh, okay. That explains it. Yeah, I was going to say, it looked more electrical to me.
Commissioner Buss, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Cohen, did you have any questions?
Yes, Kathy had a comment. Go ahead, Kathy.
I just wanted to follow up with what Don said. The third location was the Rancho and TOB site. That was one that was part of the study. It was a challenge to get data during COVID, and that was also collected during school time. So we weren't able to collect the data using data out in Ventura, where there's a Starbucks very close to the high school and college. So there's quite a few, even though it's not right next to a school, a lot of parents from Kalina Middle School go there. And one thing that's just more information is that this location, the building is only 850 square feet. So the amount of parking, it's based on a ratio where they're looking at the size of the other Starbucks and then looking at the demand for parking, and then they adjust it. So the the number of parking spaces where they came up with 4 really has to do with, it's a very, very small building. 850 square feet is very small, and the other 3 sites had larger buildings. That being said, being that they're next to school sites, you don't have the students coming in parking. You have students walking where their parents are dropping them off. So we'll still see a lot of activity at the site, but not during the peak hour. There's not to be expected a lot of the student population parking there.
I have a follow-up question then.
Sure.
If we're anticipating the primary traffic being foot traffic from the students there, would that design inherently be safe for pedestrians, seeing we're funneling them all into one area that's the direct outlet where the drive-through comes through there? Is that where you want your pedestrians walking?
You could always say there's no really great way to get the pedestrians on site because they always have to go through the drive-through, but it's very predictable. They will know where to go. They are funneled in one very specific area, and the cars in the drive-through are stopped, and they are high school students. So the feeling it's the best place that we should be able to funnel the students. And yes, there'll be a lot of students that use the Starbucks, but I think Starbucks is looking for, it's a neighborhood Starbucks. There'll be a lot of people throughout the community that will come to the Starbucks. So it's not just students.
I say this because I attended Thousand Oaks High School, and I was there when that gas station was open. And I know that gas station was used as a convenience store for a large number of students, both before and after school. So I have it was a long time ago, but I do have memories of how busy that location is. And because it is COVID, I have not been able to get a good grip going over there as to the size of the student body that walks through there. But I know it's substantial. And so that's what I was asking. I have another question I think might be better asked of the applicant, but I'm going to check with you guys first. Was there a conversation about building a Starbucks that didn't have a drive-through at any point?
Commissioner, I can answer that. First, before I go into that particular answer, I just want to tack on to the previous response. In addition, the pedestrian crossing will actually have a textured pavement as well. So it'll be a different, it's not just going to be paint on the asphalt, it'll have a different texture on it. So it's going to be a visual cue as well to show that these are where pedestrians are going to be located, where pedestrians will be crossing. It's a vehicle path. So it's a visual cue for both the drivers and for the pedestrians. Now, moving on to the question you just asked, we did have a conversation with the applicant team and the Starbucks representative at this location. Effectively, the Starbucks, they will not be putting in, it's another, just a pedestrian only or walk-up window only location, unless it's located in a more like a typical downtown setting area. So there was the drive-through was it was an integral part to this particular project and for attracting the tenant at that location. I will also defer to the applicant team to expand on that particular discussion that they had with their Starbucks representative.
Okay, I apologize. I do have one more question then. There are 18 bicycle parking spaces. And so we've got traffic in, traffic out, double lines, one single entrance for pedestrians. How the bikes getting in?
So the bikes, they can actually still enter in. Kathy, I'll defer to you since you're more the bike expert.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, keep going.
So bicycles, they can actually enter in its multiple ways. So one, they can actually use the vehicle driveway. Since they are technically it's a vehicle, they can ride on Moore Park Road, so they can enter in through the vehicle entrance. Alternatively, they can also, if they are walking their bike on the sidewalk, they can use a pedestrian access way and lock their bike up at that location. So there's kind of the two different ways that anyone that's riding a bike would be able to enter the site.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Cohan.
Yes, thank you. I had 2 questions. One was regarding the existing electrical line. There's a 115 kV electrical line on Moore Park Road. And where is that in correlation with the site plan?
So for that one, it's still, I can actually, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to try and pull something up.
And does it impede on the driveway access or does it sit in that landscape buffer?
Just a second. Okay, so I'm actually just going to use the rendering because it does, in the short term, it shows. So these are the electrical lines that you have here. So they're actually located within the public right of way.
Great.
So even when we're looking at it, the location of the poles, they will not impede the location of any of the new driveway entrances for this site, or even potential new driveway entrance for the medical office directly to the south. So those are located completely off-site from the project.
Great. And is there any requirement to underground electrical utilities in the public right away?
Not for this particular location, but in other instances, if they were more local, then yes. But I can also defer to Brad on that.
And before we defer to Brad, Avenue de los Flores is an existing bus stop location.
Yes.
That's used heavily by students in the community. Is there any improvement proposed for that bus stop location?
Yeah, so the applicant would be required to do a full upgrade to the bus stop, and that is contained within the conditions of approval that the applicants had reviewed.
And would the bus stop also include trash receptacles? I know a big concern of the community was excess of trash overflown within the community.
Yeah, so it would be trash, bench, and an awning as well.
Great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
I
Any
believe
other commissioner?
Ms. Now might want to augment that comment. I believe the bus stop location may be moving. Kathy?
That is correct. Based on talking to our transit manager, there's a good chance that the bus stop will be moved in the future, but it's currently right now it's there. But that'll be coordinated with the applicant. We wouldn't have him upgrade it if it's going to be moved.
Any idea where it would be moved to?
No, the whole route is changing. So it's, no, I can get you that information after the meeting if you're interested in seeing the future routes of the city.
But at the moment, based upon our current application, they would have to upgrade the bus stop as indicated in the conditions, correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Commissioner Cohen, did you have any other questions before I ask a few?
That is all. Thank you.
All right, I just have a few, and it's probably, Mr. Nielsen, going to require you bring up that rendering again, not yet. Did we get any response, comments, communications from the high school in any way whatsoever with regard to the application?
Oh, we did not.
Is there, I'm assuming not, but is there any other grading that's going to be necessary as part of this process?
Not really beyond the site grading itself.
Via Jasmine, there's currently parking for, I believe, 3 hours at a time. Is that going to change in any way?
No. So on Calle Jasmine, because the project is actually going to be closing the driveway apron on that side, so you can actually, you might be able to get, it's an additional parking space on Calle Jasmine, but that would not be impacted by this particular project since it is trying to, it's not providing any access, either pedestrian or vehicular access to that side of the street.
And again, I'm assuming for the people that live right there, they may not want that to be all of a sudden a huge parking hangout. Would there be limitations in terms of the amount of time somebody can park there?
I would actually have to defer to Public Works on that, because since that is located within the public right of way, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Mr. Kearns, any idea?
I have to defer to Kathy. Kathy, do you know if there's anything's going to change as far as the amount of time you can park in Calle Jasmine?
No, we would do it on a case by case basis. In this case, as if more people ended up parking there and the residents across the street weren't happy about it, we would look into it and do a study. It is a public street and it's open to the public. Currently, there's quite a bit of parking that's parked on there that may not be related to the residents that live directly adjacent to it, but we would do a study at that time.
So it's something that the residents could communicate with the city if they found that there was an excessive problem with regard to parking.
Absolutely.
Mr. Nielsen, going back, I think we can, and again, the great thing about having great commissioners, they ask a lot of the questions that I already had, but in terms of the sidewalk, I know that there's some improvements. I noticed that there's a bunch of wooden poles, telephone poles. Is there any plans for the city to ever replace those poles up and down Moore Park?
I will have to defer again to Public Works, to Kathy, either Kathy or Brad.
Yes, those are 66 kV high powered, high voltage power lines. Developers not required to underground those, but SCE has a 20A program where we collect fees every year, and it all goes into a pot. And eventually, we'll have enough money to do some more projects like that. And as you know, right now it undergrounds at Columbia and goes south. So this is a long-term plan to eventually continue going north and underground those high voltage lines.
Okay. Mr. Nielsen, could you pull up that rendering again? Picture says 1,000 words, so it's easier if I just refer to the rendering.
Are you able to see it?
So, yeah, I got it. So just so everybody can get an idea exactly, the way that people are supposed to access the business from car, bike, and on foot, which way is it supposed to be?
Pardon me. So the designated pedestrian access would be, it's kind of behind this, what you can see as a power pole here, but it would be a pedestrian access crossing over here. And then vehicular access would be just slightly down, right in this particular location. And so that's where all access would be funneled to for the particular site.
So there's no access on Jasmine or on Las Flores, correct?
That is correct. And I can actually go to the next slide and I can show you that. Theoretically. So here we're just using the conceptual landscape plan. There was there's an existing driveway off the Calle Jasmine and off of Avenida de los Flores. Those two would be closed off and the applicant would have to make necessary upgrades to right-of-way improvements there. And then you'd have, a new driveway created right here in order to, and that's where all the vehicular access would be taken off of. And then right here, this is where all of the pedestrian access would be taken off of.
So we're funneling a lot of people in a kind of somewhat of a small area.
That is correct. And even though it's in a small area, they're all in a designated location. So it's more of a, it's predictable pattern, path of travels for both vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles.
The driveway and there was one of the letters from the public was from the southern neighbor, I guess, who was concerned with regard to the easement and how they did not consent essentially to allow their easement to be used. Would that property owner's easement still be part of these plans, or is it now separate?
So as part of this particular plans, the project site would not require the use of that easement. However, the easement would still exist on the site. Now, if the adjacent, a lot of it does come down to the wording of that particular easement as well, which staff, we actually don't have access to that particular wording. But it is a private easement between the two property owners, and so it becomes more of a private issue between the two of them if they had decided to utilize that easement.
So, and one of the conditions you indicated was that the applicant has to get an agreement with that property owner as to that easement in order for this to go forward, correct?
The applicant would have to, in order to make the improvements to the medical building site, they would have to get agreement with that particular applicant to make those improvements. Now, in terms of the access, using that access easement, that is actually already recorded as part of the medical office building's property. So the project site can already utilize that existing access, that existing easement to gain access to the site. The applicant, they opted to move. In one of the original proposals, they were proposing to utilize that existing access easement to gain access to the site. However, after concerns were raised about potential impacts to the medical office building property due to any potential vehicle, the queuing lane backing up, maybe potentially blocking it, people parking and walking, parking at the medical office building and walking to Starbucks, the decision was made after discussion between staff and the applicant to try and create to differentiate between the two, to create two new driveways so that they can discriminate between which people are going to which property.
Okay. I got a few comments from some people saying in terms of the traffic, which obviously is a concern. Is there any way to, and again, this is a question I got, so I'm relaying it on, is in terms of the pedestrian traffic, is there any way to create a diagonal walkway or something where traffic is stopped both ways to allow people to walk in an L shape to get there, as opposed to kind of creating things where people will cross inappropriately?
I'm sorry for that one. I'm not entirely sure, but let me bring something up and just so I can see if I can visualize what you're saying. Are you talking about trying to do a diagonal like this, going across the driveway? Or the
No, so like in Beverly Hills and some busy streets, there are certain points in time where you can not only walk across the street either perpendicular, you actually can walk diagonally. It's kind of an all.
Oh, okay. So you're talking, it's the site as a whole. It's
From that corner to the corner where the high school is.
yeah, you're talking, it's like a pedestrian scramble.
Correct.
For that, I do have to, if you'll bear with me for just a second while I bring up aerial.
Because even, I mean, obviously there's no place to sit inside, so this is not supposed to be a dining establishment, so people are supposed to take stuff and go. And the question being at the end of the day is, there's obviously a lot of foot traffic that's going to be created.
Yeah, so what you're referring to is creating a diagonal pedestrian crossing from the high school side to the project site. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I was asked that question by somebody, so I said I would relay it on.
Yeah, I will defer to Kathy on that.
It's an interesting idea. We just don't have that high of volume of pedestrian traffic that would use all four corners at one time. I've observed it when the project came in before with the 7-Eleven. I sat out there for quite a while and was watching the students in the morning. And they do, you could say, somewhat platoon across, the signal changes, and they all are headed for that northwest corner. So to have a scramble, I think would just, for what it's worth, really confuse the students more than anything else, because they're not used to it and we don't have it anywhere else in the city. But you know, it's something in the future, but it's probably something we wouldn't consider right now.
Okay. Last question I got a lot, it was obviously out in the comments, is that does the city have the ability to deny applications if there are too many of a certain type of business in a certain area? I did not find a code section that would limit the city in some way of saying you can't put a business here because there's one 2 miles away. Is there any kind of code section you're familiar with that would actually provide for that?
No, so the city, we can't control where the businesses are actually located. So if there's, technically they could have like 50 Starbucks along here. That is more of a corporate decision for Starbucks. So we physically can't control where they are actually going to be locating or what specifically, it's like what type. So the city can't say we're only going to reserve the site for a hamburger stand or anything else. I will actually defer over to Patrick. He'll be a little bit more eloquent in the legalese than I am.
Well, I'm not sure I will be more eloquent, but we certainly don't have a statute at this time. I will tell you that there are some very sensitive types of uses in which you have some required spacing between the uses. You think of something like possibly something like cannabis or even hemp or something of that nature, where you might actually have a distance requirement where you can't have more than one in a certain zone or area. I will tell you though that the distance usually is about 1,000 feet at the most when you see those type of statutes. We don't have any at this time in our code. So the answer to your question is we don't have one. And you kind of expect that the business owner who's going to be investing in this property thinks you're going to invest in something that they think is going to work.
And ultimately, I think what you've said, Mr. Nielsen, is the only reason this is really before us is two setback issues. One, which would limit the size of the building to 5 feet in width, and the other was for the wall, correct?
That is correct.
Otherwise, it would have been just approved through the ordinary plan check process.
You would be able to go through the administrative approval process that the city has.
All right, those are my questions. Any other commissioner questions of staff? Commissioner McMahon?
Yes, I did have one question about the traffic flow. In your report, it shows that a lot of the drivers will be making a U-turn at Moore Park and Columbia Road. Have you done some sort of analysis? Is that going to be able to be capable of handling all those U-turns? Will the signal be adjusted, or how is that going to work?
I will have to defer to Kathy on this.
Yes, that's the traffic pattern if you're going southbound on Moore Park, that you'll have to make that U-turn to come back up to turn into the driveway. We'll continue to monitor that intersection like we do all intersections in the city, and if we have to add additional time to make that U-turn, it would be added. At this time, we don't anticipate that much traffic because it's overall, there's not that much traffic that's going to be congested at one time. It'll be in the morning PM peak, which is we're anticipating about 80 additional morning trips. And so not all 80 would be making that U-turn, and they're not all making it at the same time, but we would continue to monitor it.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any other commissioner questions before we go to the applicant? Not hearing any. We'll go to the applicant, Megdal and Associates, that has 15 minutes. I don't know who is going to be speaking on your behalf, so whoever it is, please go ahead.
It will be Neil Scribner, should be speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Mr. Scribner, are you there? Or is it going to be Mr. Megdal or Miss Cribbs, I believe? Somebody.
Hello?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
we can hear you.
Oh, great. I don't know what was going on here. I'm Neil Scribner, architect. I'll be speaking for the applicant tonight. Taylor Megdal, the applicant, is available if you have questions, but he doesn't wish to speak otherwise. You asked a question about the 5-foot wall setback. The residential area to the east had great concerns about their children walking to and from work, also loitering after work. And so we have the 10-foot landscape requirement on the east side next to Jasmine, but we moved the wall 5 feet closer to the sidewalk so the kids would not have a space to stop and play around. So that's the reason. We still have the 10-foot landscape, and we just moved the wall so at the parents' request, because they wanted that space to be reduced. So that's the reason why the 5-foot wall setback. Okay, now the Starbucks turned out to be a perfect size project for this site. And the reason is that we can provide nearly 3.5 more stack spaces than normally provided for other drive-thrus in Thousand Oaks. And we can also exceed the required parking required on this site. When we met with the neighbors, their biggest concern, as I said, was the safety of their children walking to school. Now, to solve this problem, we eliminated driveways on Jasmine and Flores. And of course, we kept the one driveway on Moore Park as far as we could from the intersection. We will also be building, besides the 6-foot block wall in Jasmine, we're going to do 6-foot metal fence facing Arbalest and a 6-foot fence on Moore Park. And that's to keep the children from cutting diagonally across the site as they go to school. Now, the 6-foot wall will also serve as a sound wall. It'll help mitigate sound from the site. It will hide cars that are driving behind the wall. And it'll also keep lights after dark from projecting into the surrounding neighborhood. We have faced the pickup window towards Moore Park because that's the noisy part. And with all the traffic on Moore Park, I doubt if you'll hear anything anyway. I talked to the medical representative next door. I believe he was the owner. And we talked about the traffic problem there of commingling traffic, and he definitely did not want to commingle. So that's the reason. And then, as you heard the conversations with the staff, my client decided to build 2 separate driveways. Now, keep in mind, my client will pay for all this driveway work for both the neighbor as well as himself. When we close down the existing driveway between the 2 properties, it allows us to add 3 more parking spaces to the residential I'm sorry, to the medical building next door. Now, keep in mind that the traffic here will be right in only and right out. And the medical building driveway comes first, 50 feet before our driveway. So he's right in, right out. And then after his driveway, you come to our driveway, we're right in and right out. So it should not be interfering with his traffic whatsoever. Now, some of the neighbors said they would like to see a park on this site. So we took that as a clue, and we planted, you may notice on the landscape plan, as Mr. Nielsen said, we have a lot of trees on this site. And the reason is to create a very special, unique look, a park, more of a park-like setting than you would normally see on a commercial site. The building is also earth tone and covered with a lot of stone, and it should blend in nicely with the park setting. We will be providing a full roof on this, pitched roof on all directions, the same as you would see on a residential. So it blends currently into the residential area more than a typical commercial building you might see. The client accepts and approves all the conditions of approval. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scribner. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Commissioner McMahon.
I do want to ask about that stacking, and I'm still concerned that you're asking your customers to merge, just to merge, and there's no benefit to them. And I feel like you're going to get a lot of grouchy customers. And I'm wondering whether you would be considering having a second order, having two order places, for one for each of those merging lanes.
I think there's a couple answers regarding merging. People, we merge on the freeway, we merge on on-ramps, and there's probably other situations where we do that, and we're quite used to it at much higher speeds. Now, these people are going to just be sitting and moving very slowly. But here's a fact. When they order, they like to be 5 cars back. And the reason is by the time they get to the window, the order is ready. And that's usually in the neighborhood of 1 minute. So that's how good they are. So 2 cars are next to each other at that turn. We'll have a minute to figure it out. So I don't think it'll be a problem, frankly.
Thank you.
And Commissioner McMahon, it's Taylor Magdal, the applicant. Also, just to segue and dovetail off what Neil said, there also, if you did a 2 menu board option at this site, then you would be pulling the menu board closer to Kaya Jasmine, just by the nature of the site, which would cause more noise to the residential area. We purposefully have designed the menu board to be closest to the corner to mitigate for sound and bleeding into the residential. So, along with the fact that I think, customers and drive-through customers are being civil these days and organizing themselves, it would also be, a worse, design feature for noise.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Buss.
Okay, this can be either from Mr. Magdal or Mr. Scribner. I didn't see the design change plan as far as the neighboring property goes. Mr. Scribner, you just mentioned that you're adding 4 spaces to the southern properties parking lot, the medical center. And, but my impression is that the owner of the property to the south of you sent a letter in opposition to this. So has he agreed to this? And B, if he isn't in agreement with this, if we pass this this request, will you be able to get this done anyway?
I think as Mr. Nielsen mentioned, that if for some reason he didn't agree to it, we already have a driveway there, which we can simply tie into because both property owners agreed to this in the past. Now, when I worked out the plan with the neighbor, the last time I sent it to him, it was his response to make the driveway a bit wider, which I did. And then I actually added 3 parking spaces. It would be in the northwest corner of the medical site. There are 3 spaces between a planter and the sidewalk.
Yes, I parked one of them today.
Yeah, those are the new spaces.
And Commissioner Buss, also, you know, I want to clarify too that we did approach the neighbor specifically because we have this large single easement where we both share one curb cut. And we actually reached out proactively to him. I read the letter in the packet, you know, which I thought was slightly disingenuous only because we've been trying to be very proactive, you know, with the gentleman and the owner. And the idea was to separate and bifurcate them. We worked, you know, obviously right in hand with Kathy, who's done a spectacular job helping us and, you know, trying to get the traffic and the mitigation right, as well as, you know, the impact to the adjacent property owner. And the reason we came up with the separate driveways was actually to tailor and cater to the adjacent office owner. Candidly, you know, Starbucks nor, you know, the property owner or future property owner of the site, you know, wouldn't mind whether it's one big access or 2 separate ones. So, you know, we were kind of indifferent, but we recognized that it would be a better solution, you know, for the adjacent property owner to have it be separate and bifurcated, which is, you know, the path that Kathy had recommended and that we integrated into our submission.
I got it. So maybe I'm confused at this point. The plans that I'm seeing are not including an easement or any kind of work done to the southern property. Is that correct? So he won't be impacted at this point?
Yes. So
I think the civil plan probably shows the easement. I did not show it on the architectural, but I think it was a 30-foot driveway splits the property line between the two. So the existing driveway would be in between the 2 new ones that I showed. So that's where it's located.
So
Commissioner Buss, yeah, so Commissioner Buss, so basically the existing driveway that is in place as is, if you were to go to the site today, has the, let's say, the egress out of both of our sites on the adjacent property owner's property, and then the ingress for both of our sites on our property or on this proposed property. So it was basically 50-50 on each of our properties, which is why the existing which is per the existing easement in place. And so what our proposal was to the adjacent property owner in conjunction with Kathy was to say, okay, instead of having this, you know, easement area, we would you know, where we shared a driveway, we would bring our driveway completely onto our property and we would make the improvements to his property to make an ingress and egress onto his as well. So they'd be completely independent. There wouldn't be an easement, you know, with the site plan we have today.
So that's the plan as is existing. Now, during the construction, how much will their entrance be impacted? Because that's the only entrance to that property.
I can answer that. We can actually build their driveway and not impact the current traffic into the medical building because it's totally separate.
Okay, so they won't be impacted at all. So you don't need their cooperation in order to build this property as designed.
Well, I think we would need it for the new driveway on their site. But as I said, when I talked to him, he did not want to mix traffic, and he was concerned that the Starbucks customers would park over on the medical. Well, the best way to solve that problem is to have two driveways, because you can't turn left to go back to the medical building once you're in Starbucks. So it really works best for him this way. And I'm amazed if he's against it.
Commissioner Buss,
I'm still not clear.
Commissioner Buss, I can actually bring up the civil drawing to try and help. If you're willing for me to share my screen again, so I can show the civil drawing.
I appreciate
it's easier
that.
to see that instead of just trying to talk about it. Just a second. Okay, are you able to see this? This is the civil drawing.
Yes.
Okay. So here is the proposed driveway on the adjacent property. Sorry.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you.
So the current driveway would actually be spanning the two properties. And then the applicant is currently proposing constructing it a new driveway, two new driveways, one for the medical office building and then one for this particular property.
So this will require the cooperation of that person or no?
It would require the cooperation of the adjacent property owner, just because it would require modifications to their property. And as I mentioned previously, so Public Works, they've taken that into account, and in their conditions, they actually embed that for any of the improvements as they're moving forward. So if the commission were to approve the project, and if the project is submitted to the city for formal review, going through Public Works, they would be reviewing this, and would have to be effectively it's a private agreement between the two property owners to make these improvements to the medical office building.
Okay, and at this point, it sounds like, based upon what Mr. Scribner and Mr. Megdal are saying, we're not there yet. And probably not even close, based upon the letter that the other property owner wrote.
Well, I think if he understands that this solves his problem that he mentioned to me when we first talked to him, he does not want to mix traffic. He doesn't want their customers to come park on him. This solves both of those problems. I think when he sees this, finally, he will agree, but I don't know. I can't speak for him.
Yeah, my concern is that 50 feet distance between those two entries could create confusion for people following. That is a road where the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. Somebody turns on their turn signal, and the person behind them is trying to go to the Starbucks, and the person in front wants to go to the medical center. That could end up being an interesting interaction for those two people that day, because we're talking roughly 2 car lengths apart, those two driveways.
Yeah, remember we already have that condition. The medical building has been functioning under those terms, and the problem with the medical building today, because the driveway's in the center, when you come off Moore Park, you have to make a 180-degree turn and go back south before you can turn left into the parking. This will clean that up, so all you have to do is make a quick right turn. That'll speed up the entire process.
I'm not following that.
Well, if you look at the plan with the joint driveway, when you come in,
180-degree turn. Where do you have to reverse yourself?
I'm sorry?
Where are you talking about a 180-degree turn? Where's that at?
When you enter the current driveway for the medical building,
yeah,
you have to make a 180-degree turn and go back south before you enter the driveway.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You turn and then it bends around. Gotcha.
So
Okay.
if you're going 45 and you know you got to make a U-turn, you're going to be slowing down, I think, considerably more.
Well, that's what I was saying is that person's slowing down significantly, and then the person that wants to go to Starbucks behind them may think that they're going to go to the next exit, and then we got all kinds of fun. So yeah, so I agree that that's a possible issue. And then when you add in the fact that there's a bike lane there and 18 bike parking spaces at the Starbucks, that gets real exciting. So yeah, that's a lot to consider. I appreciate that. I had one other question, a little bit off, but still related. As the Starbucks, I assume, has some understanding or reasonable guess as to what percentage of their clientele will be pedestrian, bicycle, and automobile. Do you have a breakdown on that for us, what your best guess is, or is that something you could share?
Commissioner Buss, I don't have a estimate of those, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, I suspected it may be, a corporate secret or whatever, but
I wish, Commissioner Buss, I wish I did. I'd be able to pick out better Starbucks sites, but I don't have, insight into those kind of dynamics and the sales projections.
Let me add that that was the whole point of the traffic study, was to try to find out this information. I think because this is the neighborhood center, it's a little different than downtown. But nevertheless, I think the traffic study took into account all the kids, as well as the additional stack space that would be needed. And that, of course, is what we responded to. And we added, as you know, even more stack, and we added more parking.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, that's all the questions for me.
Commissioner Cohen, any questions for the applicant?
No additional comments, questions.
I had just a few, since my other commissioners asked a lot of questions that were ones I had. The sign on the property indicates that the applicant is Taylor Megdal. However, the document we have here says it's Megdal and Associates, which I looked up and I don't see that it's an existing entity. So exactly who is the applicant?
Thank you, Commissioner Lanson. The Megdal and Associates is an LLP, so that's kind of my parent company application name, but the property actually will be Megdal Oaks LLC, so it'll be put into a separate LLC if approved.
Is that an entity that exists yet?
It was filed and does not exist yet, but will be registered in probably 2 or 3 weeks, Commissioner.
Again, the reason I ask is that there's indemnifications and lots of obligations for the applicant, and I just want to see if it's something that exists in terms of making those representations. So it's an entity to be formed, correct?
Correct, Commissioner.
And looking at the property right next to the sign notifying of this hearing is a huge for sale sign. And in fact, if you go on LoopNet, it looks like it's under contract. Is there a new owner or going to be a new owner?
Yes, Commissioner. So actually the ownership group, the Cox Family Trust, who is also on this Zoom, Justin Cox, if you have any questions for him. But the idea is if this is approved, we will acquire it from the existing ownership and apply for the building permits and sign all of the legal documentation under the new and actually new entity that we form.
Okay. And I know that Starbucks has a very specific requirement as to building. Are you building the structure if it's approved, or is Starbucks building it?
So Commissioner Lanson, Starbucks will be building, we will be in charge, the landlord group will be in charge of a lot of the offsites and the improvements to the driveways and the sidewalks and the new proposed bus stop and so forth. And Starbucks will actually build and construct the actual building.
Mr. Heer, does that require anything to have Starbucks be a co-applicant or somehow involved in some of the representations and conditions?
I think if they have an agreement, then they're going to be required to assume all the responsibilities and liabilities, obligations from the current owner. And if that current owner is either the Cox Family Trust or Megdal Oaks LLC, that will be sufficient.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Those are the questions I had. Any other commissioner questions for applicants or the applicant before we go to general comment? Hearing none. Mr. Scribner and Mr. Megdal, is there any other comments you wanted to make as part of your presentation?
No, thanks.
No, thanks, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. We will now go to comments. I believe, I know I had a Jennifer Cribbs here who is from Starbucks. I'm assuming she doesn't want to add anything. So we'll go to the first general comment, which was Justin Cox. Let me actually read the part that goes with this. Now we'll go to public comment. We have a number of speakers that keeps getting added, so I don't know the exact number, but all will be appearing by video conference. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your city of residence. We will start with Justin Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to I'll reserve any comments or questions you have until the end because I'm part of the applicant team, so you can move on to the public speakers. I appreciate it.
Oh, sorry about that. It didn't say that. So thank you very much. Next, we will go to, again, unfortunately, all it says in my sheet is Sue. Is there somebody named Sue? Does not appear as much. So I will go to the next name I have, that is Amy Wilson. Miss Wilson, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. Hold on, I'm trying to turn on my video. Okay, there we go.
Go ahead, you have
Hello.
3 minutes.
Okay. So I'm Amy Wilson. I live on Calle Jasmine. I am to, I guess, the south of the medical office. I'm the second house in. So my house fronts on Calle Jasmine, backs up on Moore Park Road. You know, I see this as a traffic and safety nightmare. It's definitely going to change the scope of my neighborhood. You know, I have those same concerns that Mr. Buss was talking about with the driveways and the cars trying to get in and out of there. That is 45 miles an hour. My house, my backyard is not very far down Moore Park Road from there. Based on seeing the other Starbucks, like I was near the one on Duesenberg, and the cars are poured out onto T.O. Boulevard. So I feel like inevitably cars will pour out of the drive-through onto Moore Park Road and be stopped there, which, you know, we have, you know, brakes screeching all the time behind our house. And our home happens to be one of the backyards that is on the same, part of our yard is on the same level as Moore Park Road. We have had cars hit that wall. So I'm very nervous at having cars lined up on Moore Park Road, dead stopped, where somebody might end up coming through my backyard where my kids and my dogs are. The other issue with that is if they cover the driveway for the medical office and those people can't get in, then they're going to come park on Calle Jasmine. We have a certain amount of parking from the medical office. But if they can't get into the driveway, then they're all going to come onto Calle Jasmine. The other issue is with regards to the U-turn on Moore Park Road and Flores. I don't think people are going to do that. I think they're going to pull out and they're going to make a right onto Flores and a right onto Calle Jasmine to get back to Jan's through the neighborhood. And, you know, that's going to make it extremely unpleasant for us. I mean, I have a son who's got his friend down the street and he rides his bike and scooters there. And if we've got more people racing through our neighborhood, he's not going to be able to do that. And the other issues are the trash. I already have McDonald's and Carl's and people who get chicken at Vaughn's throwing things in my backyard. If somebody's getting a Starbucks and walking down the street, that's going to end up in my backyard too.
Got about 10 seconds.
Okay, and then the other issue, which I think maybe Mr. Buss could speak to, there was a drive-through dairy. I think we talked about this with 7-Eleven on the other side of Flores. And part of the problem was that kids hung out there too much and loitered from the high school. Am I wrong? I mean, so I think that's good. We're going to have a big problem with that.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Bill Wilson, which I'm assuming is related. Is there a Bill Wilson here?
Hey there.
Go ahead.
All right. So I'm a school teacher and I teach high schoolers. So I know exactly how many Starbucks cups I have every morning at the 8 a.m. class. And so I'm glad Mr. Buss went to Teal High School because he knows. See, I know because I live 2 doors down from where they're proposing to do this. It's a very sleepy neighborhood, as Mr. Buss knows. It's very residential. It's very young families. Right across the street from where they're proposing the Starbucks is babies. They have babies, 10-year-old. We're all around this high traffic area and high noise area. So I guess the big issue, there's a couple big issues, right? I do believe that I'll start with one. Noise is going to be really a problem for all those houses that live near there. We don't have street lights. We don't have sidewalks. It's very sleepy, young family neighborhood. They didn't show it in the pictures, but it's surrounded by houses. It is absolutely a horrible place for this kind of high traffic drive-through. It is just not a place for it. It's a place for a medical building. Perfect for that. Sleepy little medical building right there next to us. We can do that. But I think to have all the noise of them ordering, I'd like to have a Venti, Starbucks, Mocha Choca, latte. It's that's going to be all day long in my backyard. I'll hear it all day, all night. It's just going to be going and going, and especially across the street with those people's babies. So it's going to be really bad noise. Secondly, it's going to be, as you know, all the high school students, while they're texting with their cell phones and carrying it and the 8 o'clock bell is ringing, they're going to run across, jaywalking across. So I would predict some fatalities, possibly. I mean, it'd be hard to predict not a fatality of a jaywalking fatality as they're running across and on their texting and running across their Starbucks cup, trying to get across. And it's 45 miles per hour. They're screeching on their brakes. There's no turn lane right there when you're going north on Moore Park Road, taking a right. So they're going to come screeching to a halt, and it's going to be, it's really going to be a nightmare. Especially, I know why the medical office doesn't want it. It's going to block their driveway. There's no way. And then when they come out, they're going to get T-boned. They're going to come out of Starbucks, and they're going to get T-boned at 45 miles an hour as they come out of the Starbucks. It's just if they can get out. So it's really, really a horrible idea from a noise perspective, a traffic perspective, traffic fatalities, possibilities. It's just not a good place for it. And then we're in a sleepy little neighborhood. They're all going to park. All the kids park on Jasmine already. So it's already packed with parking. And now you're going to have people trying to park around, double parked. You'd have to, if you lived here, you would never, ever consider putting this in here with a high traffic drive-through. Ever. You just wouldn't do it. It's not a place for it. All right. So my neighbors feel the same way. It's just COVID and Zoom and no one's here. He also did Labor Day, tries to kind of do a bait and switch with the date. He always did he did the September Labor Day, and no one's going to show up. We are very, very into this, not having it in our neighborhood. It's just COVID and Zoom. That's why we're not here.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
We got it. Next I have, it says Kyle. I'm assuming maybe Kyle Miller.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, so same thing, probably like all the other residents. I mean, just looking at this, I don't think anyone's ever passed a Starbucks drive-through that hasn't been pouring out on the street. They showed that picture with the 18 cars. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with that little lot there. I don't see 18 cars fitting in there like that, especially, I mean, unless they're bumper to bumper, like a valet parking lot. That's kind of concerning to us too. Like, what if there's an emergency, something caught on fire, there's a medical emergency? How are they going to get like ambulances, fire trucks in there? It started off like for a 24-hour 7-Eleven, then it went down to a 21-hour 7-Eleven, and now it's like an 18-hour Starbucks. The hours of 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. is kind of insane. Like, I mean, if you have a speaker right by your house, I mean, we're going to hear just like, I forget his name, Wilson. I mean, people are going to be ordering who knows what. We're going to hear it. It went from like a 10-foot wall to an 8-foot wall, I think now to 6, but now it's supposed to be like 10 feet of plants. That's not going to, definitely not going to stop the noise. What else?
The lights.
Yeah, lights from the vehicles.
The parking on Jasmine.
And the parking on Jasmine. There's already a ton of high schoolers parking there. There's a medical office staff. There's already trash everywhere. Just multiple concerns. It's the same thing.
Would you want it in the backyard of your baby's house?
Yeah.
It's our backyard.
That's all we got. Most of it's already been said, so that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, Patricia Bond.
Hi, I'm Patricia Bond, and I'm actually Kyle Miller's neighbor across the street. So I'm the house facing, I'm on the east side on Jasmine, off of Jasmine on Calle Clavel. And same basic concerns. One of the things, again, the wall height, I think it's too low. You've got higher, trucks are a little bit higher the lights are going to come, my bedroom faces north. So it's going to be right at the front of my house into my bedroom. Not to mention when we had the meeting with Mr. Megdal in September, my concern was also putting some type of fencing on the south side of the property, a block wall or something, because the cars coming in are facing east and all of those lights are going to be towards my house. Then when they're facing, you know, when the wall is going to be on the east side on Jasmine, the wall really does need to be a little higher than that. So, and again, the noise, the traffic, people will probably be making, those that can't find parking are gonna, again, come onto Jasmine or even possibly in front of my house. And it's bad enough when the high school is in session, having just a ton of people around. And I'm just trying to think if there was anything else. Most people have touched on this stuff, but my big concern also is the south wall, having some type of high wall, because even if they have greenery, it's not going, they're not going to put in 12-foot trees or whatever they said they're going to put in. They're going to take some time to grow. And in the meantime, we're going to have lights facing in the front of our house all the time. And again, noise. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of accidents because people coming northbound, we're going to end up having a one-lane highway because you know that the proposed amount of cars, they're going to go out onto the street. The people trying to get into the medical building are going to be stuck. It's just going to be a big, I think that's a really big problem. I'm worried about all the high schoolers and all the kids walking. I get that we do need something, but I really am concerned about the well-being of, first of all, the kids that are walking. And, you know, I don't really want a ton of traffic. It's bad enough what we have right now. So I think that's about it.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Again, remember, say your name, city of residence, and then go ahead and give the comments. Next is Jen in Cantonese, who looks like she's not in front of her computer. So I will go back to her, maybe when she comes back. Chris Huddleston. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. How are you?
Good, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to say I'm a commercial property owner. I don't live in the city, but you know, I've driven the stretch numerous times, and you know, I do think that you know it's an interesting location for Starbucks. I think it is a neighborhood location, which is obviously going to serve the community. But I think the drive-through, the benefit of it, just from looking at it and you know, looking at the designs and everything, and sitting in on the hearing, I think the developer's done a really interesting job of keeping everything on site. I've never seen a queue like that where there's that many cars on site before, the wall around it. I think a lot of the things that the neighbors are saying does make a lot of sense, but they've all been mitigated and or can be mitigated in the future. And, you know, just from someone who does, you know, tries to do work in Thousand Oaks, I think this is just a really sort of a win for the city, especially in COVID right now, where, you know, some of my properties that, you know, I work on, you know, we're having trouble leasing and bringing businesses in. So at a time like this where Starbucks does want to, you know, actually move forward with a project and, you know, build something that fits into the character of the community and does actually look really great, you know, I think it's something that shouldn't be discounted and really should be taken seriously. So anyway, thank you for having me. And
thank you. What's your city of residence?
I live in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. We're going to go now to Lila Askari. Please tell us your city of residence.
Hello, hi there. It's Leela Ascari. I live in West Hollywood, California, and I work in the area. So, you know, I drive on Moore Park Road for several years, and you know, I've just seen that vacant piece of land sitting there. So when I found out that a Starbucks was coming, I was really excited, and still I'm really excited, and I hope this works out. You know, it's kind of unsightly, that plot of land that's just been sitting there. And a drive-through would be incredible. You know, I've seen current, you know, Starbucks being built, and they're all just stunning. And so I think that would just be fitting to the community. I know that it's in front of a high school. But, you know, where I live, I live in between a high school and a Starbucks. And, you know, for me and my neighbors, we're all very appreciative and, you know, grateful for that Starbucks. Unfortunately, it's not a drive-through. So that kind of doesn't really help me out, but this would. And thank you for having me. And I hope, I cross my fingers that it works out.
Thank you. Ms. Cantniece, are you back? I see you walking through your computer here and there. Jenna Cantniece, are you back? I see you in the corner of the computer. Ms. Cantniece, there you are. You're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Yeah, before we were opposed to the 7-Eleven, and Taylor came back with the Starbucks offer. And to me, obviously something has to go in there. And, you know, people are saying the least, you know, concern of a building would be a medical building, but it'd have to be like 3 stories tall or 2 stories tall. And then, you know, it'd be looking in people's backyards. And so the Starbucks with it in out on Moore Park Road, I mean, that cuts off our neighborhood, Jasmine and Flores, as much as you can. And I know people are saying cars are going to be backed up, but there's a Starbucks at the Tilly's. There's a new drive-thru at Jan's. There's a Starbucks in Ralph's. There's a standalone Starbucks next to Vaughn's. There's one in Vaughn's, and now you have this one. So that's 6 on Moore Park Road. So I don't know how many people in Thousand Oaks are going to be in line at this Starbucks, but I don't foresee it spilling out onto to Moore Park Road.
And it's not directly off the freeway too, so you're not getting like that traffic on the freeway.
Yeah, the only thing I can say is the hours. He went 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. We'd like 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then what was the other thing? Well, 9 p.m. Yeah.
Could you tell us your city of residence, please?
Thousand Oaks. We live on Calle Clavel. So we're right up the street from the project.
Okay. Anything else?
The only other concern, like they said, is the speaker. I know people who live on Arbalest, and they say the McDonald's and the P&L Burger and all that stuff, they can hear Taco Bell, they can hear people ordering. So I don't know if they can reduce the volume of the intercom or have some other way to order when people are in the drive-thru, but that would be it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Brooke Spielman. Again, please tell us your city of residence. Or is it Brock Spielman? Doesn't seem to be coming on. So I'll go back.
There we go.
Oh, there you are.
There you go. It's Brock Spielman.
What city do you live in?
I live on Calle Clavel, just right around the corner. I've lived on this street since 1965, so I do remember Jack Capuzzi's and the mobile gas station. My biggest concern, I look at the drawing for the thing, and originally the 7-Eleven was not going to have any seating or anything out front, and now they're going to have seating and stuff out front, so people will hang out. The wall is great, but now you're blocking that off. Basically, he's fencing it off, a block wall, a fence, and a fence to the entrance. So there is no real in and out there with that. Patio section is actually in the house side of the building, which that's where people are going to hang out if they have tables, which will be high schoolers. That's biggest concern is that, and the hours of the kids hanging out, trash, litter, Jasmine being a place they're going to pull in and park. But yeah, the hangout, because Domino's Pizza wasn't allowed to have tables out in front of theirs, which is right across the street. And now they want to put tables there so people hang out. And even if they did close at 9, which would be great, doesn't mean people are going to leave at 9. So
If they're open till 11.
yeah, because then they're going to be hanging out and talking, and you know how kids are talking, they're not very quiet.
Well, if they're open till 11, then they're
Yeah,
gonna have to.
and just hours 6 to 9 would be fine. But I don't think it should have places where they can sit and hang out, and I don't think the high school like that either, honestly. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On the phone, Zach Zelbin. Zach, you're on mute. One more time, Zach Zelban. There you go.
Hi, this is Zach Zelban, resident of Los Angeles, but a commercial property owner in the San Fernando Valley and also in Ventura County. I was just going to say that I think the proposed Starbucks is great, especially in the COVID environment. I think drive-thrus are more important than ever. And then on top of it, no one's more efficient than Starbucks when it comes to their online app with being able to expedite the ordering and pickup. So I think it'll be a great addition and certainly much better than what the property is right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there anything else?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. And then last, Lauren Burnett on the phone.
All right, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. I work in banking at First Republic Bank, and I'm often in the area for my commercial and real estate clients. And I know right now it's a vacant lot, but it is a commercial site, so something does have to go there. Anything you put there is going to have a lot of traffic. I've also heard some people want to make it a public park. There might be a problem with homelessness or a lot of the high school kids going there and getting into mischief. So I actually think that the Starbucks is a great addition to the neighborhood. I think it's a really smart usage of this small space, and this will guarantee that this area will be safe and secure for all of the residential owners that have called in and are concerned about the noise. I actually believe that a Starbucks will be a much better benefit than it being a different commercial site or a public park. Thank you.
Burnett, what's your city of residence?
Oh, I'm in Beverly Hills.
All right, thank you. I think that does it for our comments. I don't believe we have any other public comments, so we'll go back to staff for response to those comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Pardon me. So first, to kind of address some of the concerns about the queue spilling out onto North Moorpark Road. Some of the public speakers did mention it's the Duesenberg Starbucks and the Rancho Starbucks. So staff, we did go out to those, particularly to those sites to observe how large those vehicle queues did get. We did notice that they went beyond the vehicle queue capacity and spilled out onto the public right-of-way of either Duesenberg or Rancho or Thousand Oaks Boulevard. In those cases, the maximum number of vehicles that we saw, like on the Duesenberg site, was I think it was 19 or 20 vehicles. And on the Rancho site, when staff was observing it, it was actually a very similar number. So in both of those cases, if we were to apply those numbers to the proposed project site, all those vehicles would be able to be contained on site without spilling out onto North Moorpark Road. And that's because the vehicle queue itself has the capacity for 18 vehicles, plus there's 4 additional four additional buffer spaces, we can kind of say, that are contained within the parking lot. So you're talking, it's about approximately 22 total spaces that the site could accommodate before it would spill out onto North Moorpark Road. However, even with all of that, if the project site does become an issue and vehicles are starting to stack up within the public right-of-way, the conditions of approval, I think it's condition number 113, so 113, that is actually, it's a queuing report. It's that the applicant would have to go through, do a study and create mitigation measures for how they would be able to address those issues and resolve any potential impacts of the vehicle queue backing up into the public right-of-way. So it's actually the entire condition is about a page long. And so there's a lot of different standards and thresholds that the project would actually have to meet moving forward. And if you want, it's like you could, if you would like, we can actually defer to Chair Lanson if you would like to review that particular condition, but just highlighting it to you. Additionally, in terms of the pedestrian circulation, we know that there was significant concerns from the neighbors about students making all the crossings to the particular site. when we're looking at it, it is Moore Park and Avenida de los Flores. It is a controlled intersection, so we do have it's the lights with the signalized crosswalks and everything else. So we would hope that high schoolers would utilize those locations. But additionally, just more on the site itself is that we have proposed fencing and walls that will actually provide some of the barriers to students accessing the site from any point, and it will funnel students into a dedicated access point, so just right off of Moore Park Road. And so that's really, and that because it was a concern of staffs and just in coordination of working with the applicant, the applicant is proposing the fencing and the barriers. Now onto another point, several of the neighbors, they were also indicating that the proposed 6-foot wall height, it's too low to block from noise or light glare, or even from either the vehicles or from the light standards. And then there was another reason for that. Now for this particular project, staff did condition all the light standards, the parking lot light standards in the site. So it'd be the lights have to be shielded down towards and only focus on the project site in order to limit the amount of light bleeding onto adjacent properties. So the project has its two separate conditions based on light standards there. Additionally, any light that's on the building, on building lighting, that is covered under those conditions. So it's really trying to limit the amount of light impacts on adjacent properties. In terms of the wall height, even though it's proposed at 6 feet, the Planning Commission does have it in its authority to increase that tonight from 6 feet to 8 feet. So just so that you are aware that you are able to take that action if you so wish. Let's see here. So that's all that I have in my notes at the current time. So.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions for staff? Go ahead, Commissioner Buss.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask again, you did studies, you said, on multiple sites, 2 of those being Duesenberg and Rancho, and came to the conclusion that they do go out into the public right-of-way. One of the major differences between this Moore Park Road site and Duesenberg and Rancho is A, the speed of the street, and B, the volume of traffic on those roads. Rancho, I believe, doesn't get nearly the traffic that Moore Park Road does at its peak hours, and I know Duesenberg doesn't. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, did you use some kind of a mathematical formula to determine what you think the volume is going to be at Moore Park Road, or did you go based on those standards that what we established earlier that I forgot the name of it?
It's contained within the parking and the queuing study. So that's the standards.
Yeah, Roger standards.
Yeah. Within that particular report, as I mentioned earlier, it surveyed. It was 3 different locations. It was one in Redlands, which is almost identical in terms of the site.
That's Redlands, California, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I don't want to talk about Redlands, California. I want to talk about in our city.
Yeah.
The one on Duesenberg, the one on Rancho.
Yeah, so in terms of staff going out to those sites, it was just staff observing the vehicle queue lanes and any potential issues that they serve. And so staff, we went out, it was multiple days to during their peak hours to make those observations.
Okay, my question would be, what days did you go? Do you have that documented?
I'd have to double check that again.
Because this is important.
But it would have been.
Traffic's going to be here.
Yeah, it would, for us, it would have been a weekday and then a Saturday. So it's in order to mimic what was contained within the report. I don't know that, I can't remember this.
Was it in the last 3 months, or was this pre-COVID, or?
No, it was during COVID, prior to the December hearing date.
Okay, was it during one of the wave surges that we've experienced, or was it when things were reduced?
It would have been prior to a wave surge, because the surges have only happened recently.
Okay. Well, yeah, but I was asking, like, March to May, or I think, Thanksgiving on would be the 2 times that I expect significantly less traffic.
Can I,
So
can I add
definitely
something?
those- Sure.
Okay, so it was very important when when Wood Rogers did their traffic study, their queuing study, and the parking study, to look at as much as possible what would be considered during normal times. During COVID times isn't considered normal. We don't know if things are it's just not what we would ever consider normal. Traffic studies are never done on Mondays and Fridays. We don't do them during inclement weather. We don't do them on holidays. We do during normal times. A big part of what's going on, there's no school in session. So none of the sites in the city even reflect what would happen when school's in session. So what Don did, they went out and looked at, well, right now during COVID, what's going on, what's the stacking? But an important thing is those two existing sites don't have this extremely onerous condition that if they stack into the street, they have to do all these steps to mitigate the impact of stacking to the street, because we recognize that Moore Park Road is completely different than Thousand Oaks Boulevard and Ranch Road in Duesenberg. So we put this page-long condition, I think it's 4 or 5 paragraphs, letting the applicant know up front, you're going to have to comply and not stack into the street. We feel they provide, by providing 18-car stacking, they're not going to have this problem, but we really don't know. We don't have a Starbucks across from a high school on Moore Park Road during school time. We did our best guess using existing data from 3 other locations. And even though like the one in Redlands is not in our city, it is adjacent to a high school. So that was, and they were able to get data prior to COVID for the stacking. So that's, I guess we feel pretty good about this, and we'll just have to see what happens when it's occupied. But if it does back into the street, Starbucks has to mitigate it. And the other 2 projects don't have that in their existing permits.
Perfect. That's a great answer. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other commissioner questions of staff? Not hearing it. I just had a few ones. One thing some of the commentator mentioned, between Duesenberg and Rancho is, I don't know how many miles, I'm assuming 4 or 5 miles, and there's 2 there. Up and down Moore Park Boulevard, how many Starbucks actually are there within a few mile radius?
So within, on Moore Park itself, there's 1, 2, I did not bring that.
Well, he seemed to mention 4, including 1 in a supermarket.
Yeah, so there's actually, there's 2 in supermarkets, 1 on Cal Lutheran's campus, a current standalone site off of Jan's and Moore Park. It's in a pad building that does not have a drive-through.
The old McDonald's.
Yeah, so there's.
So you literally can't go more than a few blocks probably without finding one, which I guess the question is that going to diminish that stacking at any one location to the extent that it's more spread out?
And so for that, I would actually have to, logically, one would assume it may diminish it, but it would be more, it is a corporate decision by Starbucks on the location on where they would actually locate these particular Starbucks. Now, for this, we do know that there is going to be a new drive-through Starbucks in a Jams Marketplace, and so that's on the southern end of Moore Park Road, and then this is a new proposed new drive-through Starbucks on the northern end. So their Starbucks is effectively bookending, Moore Park Road, and I don't know what their plan is for that standalone store at the corner of Jan's and Moore Park.
One of the other things that were mentioned was the noise from the speakers, I'm assuming from where they order. And then I think also I remember reading there's supposed to be speakers just playing, I guess, ambient noise. Is that as well? Is that true?
So in terms of the speakers for condition number 34, that directly addresses the noise that's coming from them. So effectively, Starbucks, they would actually have to have, it's the lowest speaker volume possible. And then if built into that condition are steps that Starbucks would actually have to take, or the Starbucks or any subsequent operator of the site, they would actually have to take in order to try and mitigate those, or I'm sorry, to lessen those potential noise impacts to any of the surrounding neighbors. And it even goes so far as to say is that if it becomes effectively, it's a reoccurring issue, then built into the condition, I think it is, they would have to do in-person ordering after a certain time.
So with that and the parking on Jasmine and I mean, there's lots of different mechanisms set up, it sounds like, ultimately, where they could call the city to address whatever, to the extent it's not happening the way that it's being envisioned. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, so the city, we did try to anticipate the multiple different types of impacts to the adjacent neighborhoods. So noise, light, traffic, and so on and so forth, and pedestrian movement safety issues. And so the city, we did build those into the conditions of approval for the project, so that at any one point, if something becomes an issue, the city can default back to those to the conditions. One thing that we did work on with condition of approval is that we did go over it with our code compliance manager, and so he was able to review those conditions to ensure that they are enforceable as well.
Okay. Those are my questions at the moment. Any other commissioner questions of staff before we go back to the applicant?
Yes, this is Commissioner Cohan. Just one small comment.
Commissioner Cohan.
Thank you. This was in regards to Patricia Bond's question regarding the wall height. She did mention the 6-foot wall was not enough. And just for my understanding, are there 2 walls proposed, one for the queuing wall and one 6-foot high screening wall on the south side?
Yeah, so on the east side of the property along Calle Jasmine, there is a proposed 6-foot tall block wall with landscaping on either side. So there's going to be trees and other landscaping bookending it. Along Avenida de los Flores and Moore Park Road, it'll actually be, it's a 6-foot tall wrought iron fence. And the purpose behind that is to control pedestrian movements. Now, in addition to that fence, though, there'll be ample landscaping on both of those frontages in order to try and provide the vegetative sound wall.
Thank you. And is the vegetation conditioned to be mature landscaping or new landscaping installed?
I would have to double check the condition language. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And in regards to the decorative wall, is there a description of the decoration to the wall? Is it a white cylinder block wall? What type of decorative wall is proposed?
I will have to double check the proposed material board. If not, anything, I can defer to the applicant on that answer.
Well, with that, why don't you look real quick, and then we'll go to the applicant, Mr. Scribner, Mr. Megdal, Mr. Cox.
One more question real quick.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Commissioner Buck.
Mr. Cohen was asking about the southern border of the property. There is no wall there, correct? Just for my own clarification. There's no wall between the medical center and the Starbucks.
That is correct. There is no wall existing right now.
Okay, because I believe that was what the Speaker Bond was referring to.
Okay, with that, let's go back to the applicant, Mr. Scribner, Mr. Megdal, and Mr. Cox. Anything further?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, of course, before designing, I went out there and analyzed the sight lines and so on and so forth and the impacts. The house is directly east on Jasmine. The 2 houses, they don't have any openings on this side. So there cannot be any light penetration or actually sound, quite honestly. Now, the one house catty-corner, which is behind the medical, we do have the trash enclosure returning on the south side. And there are also a row of parking spaces on both the medical and this site. So any car that pulling in from the street is going to basically point straight toward Jasmine. And with the 6-foot wall, I mean, the lights are about 3 feet off the ground. A vehicle over 8 feet cannot even go in the stack space. So I don't see how any light is going to reach those people. But of course, we would be willing to build at 8 feet if that's what you want. But I just think light in the surrounding area, especially you already have a medical building that's totally open to residential. Kids can walk right through the medical site. There's nothing there to stop them. That's existing today, and I've never heard anyone complain about it. So I just don't think it's an issue, quite honestly. The block wall is a split face, integral color, so it'll be blended into the landscape. And let's see. Actually, the traffic counts, I heard that talked about. The traffic counts on Teal Boulevard are a lot bigger. Now Kathy can confirm this, but I understand the traffic counts on Teal Boulevard are much, much more than they are on Moore Park Road. Then the final issue, I think, roads are quite noisy. So the people, especially those, 3 or 4 or 5 houses away, they're hearing traffic noise from the street. And I just think we can tune down the order board. That's where really the most noise will be coming from, is the order board. You can tune that down, and this has happened other places, I understand. So we can very easily solve the sound problem. So with that, unless you have other questions.
Thank you.
Neil, and also, if I could chime in, it's Taylor Megdal, the applicant. I just want to kind of express just largely and holistically how proud I am of this proposal. The 7-Eleven proposal, was met with a resounding opposition, from the neighborhood, and I understood that. And, ironically, when we were going about that process, we tried to educate ourselves on what the community wanted. And, multiple, residential neighbors and everyone that we used to speak to regarding the 7-Eleven was saying to us, why don't you bring a Starbucks? So ironically, we were able to get Starbucks in this, very COVID depleted, retail depression environment to step up to the site. And I'm proud we got that. And I'm proud that, our team really listened to, the will of the neighbors. And I know there's still, we can't please everyone. I know there's a couple comments regarding traffic and light and noise, and we heard those, and we, during our neighborhood outreach, really designed the project to offset those and mitigate those. And I think the staff did a great job with the conditions of approval because, the conditions of approval, I think, were like 40, 60 pages, and we invite that accountability. I, reviewed those, and they were stiff, and they appropriately were stiff, and, put in place measures and, safeguards so that we can't run afoul of any of these. I know in the instance of traffic, for example, if there is bleeding, if there is an issue, we have to undergo, a lot of mitigation efforts. And if those don't work, we could get shut down, and we will be shut down. I mean, and, it will be millions of dollars, God forbid, down the drain. So we have done, a dearth of, research ourselves, along with the city's queuing study and traffic folks. Starbucks and us, we have analyzed the traffic data, the intersections, we've compared them to local stores, and ultimately it's, our capital on the line if we can't execute on a safe traffic mitigated location, because we have the fear of God and the fear of a shutdown, looming. So I think the traffic element is, obviously, a hot topic, COVID, and everybody's sensitive to it, and rightly so. But I think the safeguards.
Something happened to Mr. Megdal.
Anyway,
yes.
I do have a response for Commissioner Cohan.
Please go ahead.
So in terms of the block wall, it was the material was not included on the material board. However, the city, we do have the basically it's the design guidelines for commercial and industrial properties. The resolution number is escaping me, but any walls, they do have to abide by that. So in there, I think they calls for split face walls. If it's not, then they have to be covered in a stucco texture that will match in both the texture and color of the primary building. So either way, the wall, the material of the wall will be complement that of the primary building.
Great, thank you. And in regards to Patricia Bond's question regarding parking on Kaya to Jasmine, I understand there's 2-hour parking there currently. Has there been any discussion to not allow parking there to the public?
I'll have to default to Kathy.
Yes, and actually, I was going to respond to this earlier. The city has a permit parking program. It's very specific steps that a neighborhood goes through if they want permit parking, which allows them to just have their own, the residents in that neighborhood park on their street. For example, across from Flores, across from the high school west of Herbs, that neighborhood has permit parking so that the high school kids, not that anyone on the commission would have done that when they went to high school there, would have parked in the neighborhood. So going forward, we as staff wouldn't make any changes to the existing parking without hearing from the residents first. And we would go through the very specific steps if that's what the neighborhood as a whole wants. And part of it goes to traffic commission, and then it goes to city council, and it's administered by staff. So that's what we would be looking at for the neighborhood to come to the city, and then we would start studying it. And if that's what they wanted, that's one of the options they could pursue.
Thank you, Kathy.
Welcome.
For everybody watching, Mr. Megdal dropped off. I don't know what happened to his connection. Is there? I had a quick question, actually, Mr. Scribner, and I don't know, Mr. Hoxton. Mr. Scribner, how long would it take to actually build this, and when do you anticipate it being done?
I would imagine they'd break ground probably in April, the quickest. Probably be concerned about the rainy season a little bit, but it's a small building, as you know, so building time, once again, will probably be in the 5 to 6 months range.
Okay, good. Any other commissioner questions for staff or the applicant at this point? Anything further, Mr. Scribner, that you wanted to add?
No, Mr. Megdal tried to call me. I think he was cut off, but I'm sorry, can't talk to him.
It looks like he might have been added.
I'm guys, commissioners, I'm so sorry. I had a computer glitch, but I'm here. I'm back.
Is there anything further you'd like to add?
Thank you, Commissioner Lanson. I don't know where I got cut off, but what I'm trying to say, I suppose, in broad strokes, is we want to be held accountable. We really, appreciate the city's input. I know I spoke about traffic before I had my computer glitch. But, as far as light as well, I know in the conditions of approval, if, our lights bleed out into the street, or if, even there are cars that, have bleeding into the community, we are held accountable. And we should be. As far as noise, we have designed that call box to be as close to flush to that corner as can be. There was a previous design and site plan which had the call box closer to Kaya Jasmine, and the iteration where you would have 2 call boxes like Commissioner McMahon had conceived of, was not palatable because it brought the ordering and the menu board closer to the residential. As far as also the call box in particular, Starbucks has a technology, and I believe it's in the conditions of approval as well, that, or it could be, and we'd be happy to volunteer it.
Time's just about up, Mr. Megdal. So
sorry, Commissioner Lanson, pardon me, sorry.
Right.
We can bring the volume of output down at certain hours. So, there is a great mitigation element in play there too. And as far as just the traffic in general in Thousand Oaks around Starbucks, I know Starbucks actually initially had to be convinced of the site because there actually wasn't as much traffic at this corner as the one at Duesenberg and at Thousand Oaks Boulevard and Rancho. But the idea was, if you can build out the grid of Starbucks at optimal points within the city.
About 10 seconds here.
You got it, Commissioner. Sorry.
Okay.
If you can build out the network and you can have, more drive-throughs, you take and alleviate the stress on other locations. So I know there's a couple comments, by the folks, by our neighbors and community members, that there's too many Starbucks, which I get. I mean, I live in Los Angeles and there's a lot of them around.
Last sentence
and I
here.
would rather, be okay. Last sentence, but this could also, Commissioner, be thought of as optimizing their grid which would actually, balance the customers at all the different locations, right? So Starbucks does perceive this as alleviating other concerns at other drive. So that's, I guess, my last word. I apologize. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you. Thank you. Staff, anything further, Mr. Nielsen?
Yeah, so just a quick clarification, or not clarification, but just wanted to make sure that everyone, sorry, I'm also double checking some of the texts that are coming in. Is just to, because it has been such a big issue, the audible order speakers, it's for the noise that was major concern. It's condition number 34, and it's that particular condition that basically it directs the Starbucks or any potential future operator. They have to minimize the sounds currently, and then it also sets out basically code compliance issues for the project. And then also it sets out, it's like, here's if noises exceed during these particular timeframes, then additional steps are necessary to be taken. But if you would like to read over, it is condition number 34. It should be on page 10 of your resolution. Thank you. And that's it.
Great. Thank you. Any other commissioner questions before we close the public hearing? I'm seeing nods from the commissioners, so I will go ahead and close the public hearing at this point and invite commissioner comments and or a motion. One thing I would add before we say that really quickly, Mr. Megdal or whoever, the gate is broken at the property and anybody can go on. So I would highly suggest somebody fix that gate to make sure it limits access so there's no other issues that go on. So with that, again, commissioner comments or a motion. Commissioner McMahon?
Just a quick comment, looking at that last condition that we were talking about, it says if they can't keep the noise down, then they're going to insist that Starbucks have a person out there taking an order. So that's pretty drastic and pretty controlling for the benefit of the neighbors. I had missed that before this discussion. So that was interesting.
That is a good mitigating factor that was used. Any other commissioner comments or a motion?
I'm still of a mixed mind of this. I'm hoping my fellow commissioners can help me. I like the Starbucks. I like the idea. I like the concept. I even don't mind the idea of a drive-through. I am still concerned about the southern neighbor and the fact that they're not in agreement as to how this is going to be built, and whether we're approving a project that may not be able to exist as is, and what that means if they don't come to an agreement, or if we're inviting them to argue with each other for forever, and how will it have to come back to us. I am disheartened that all of the neighbors that called in tonight seem to be opposed to it. So I'm not. I feel bad about that if we do approve, but I am aware that the two conditions that really are coming before us are the shape of the building and that wall. So I am looking forward to hearing everybody else's comments before we make a motion on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Buss. I'm supportive of the project. I think the project does have merit. They've come a long way from what we've seen with the initial 7-Eleven. This condition number 113, the drive-through queuing, really sets a precedent in the city, I think, and really holds the hand to the fire for the applicant. I do appreciate the one ingress and egress off of Moore Park. I think that's a great solution to having more cars in the neighboring uses. I do appreciate Mr. Scribner's proposed landscaping and try to create that park-like feel. I did get that sense through the conceptual landscape plans, and I appreciate the roofing material and material of the building to match the residences. I do loudly clear the dissent from the public. Ms. Bond brought up some great points with wall height. I do recommend we raise the height to 8 feet. I think this will provide some additional screening to the residences. I do also recommend mature landscaping along the wall instead of new landscaping to really provide that buffer between the uses. As far as hours of operation, I'm okay with hours of operation. I think it's consistent with what is proposed in the surrounding areas. I understand noise is an issue, but again, there's conditions in place that hold the applicant in place. In regards to trash, I would like to see the public bus stop improved. I think that's something that is a nice amenity to the community. When I do pass by, it is in dire condition, kind of run down. I do see prior to COVID, a lot of kids hanging out there by the bus stop, taking public transit to go home. But to have public shelter there, trash can, and a nice Thousand Oaks sense of community there, I think that's helpful. I do like Commissioner Lanson's idea of a diagonal crossing. I know it's unique to the community and unique to Thousand Oaks. You know, being a student and going across the street, you want to have that sense of security, and I think providing that visible landmark between that intersection is something unique to the community and really would set a precedent for this area to really encourage that pedestrian feel, encourage pedestrians to walk to this site. So I think that's something the commission should look at and the city should look at as a whole. So those are a few comments that I brought up, but I'm open to hear other comments from the commissioners.
I'll add a few comments. As to the easement, I was originally very concerned as well, especially the tone of the letter from the neighbor. But looking at the diagrams and realizing that the solution is two separate driveways, they're not going to be connected. There's actually going to be sidewalk between them. That made it a little bit easier, realizing that the south neighbor is a separate and distinct. Now, again, obviously there has to be something done for their driveway that they have to participate in, but I don't know if they would necessarily be as objective with regard to resolving their driveway just for their property. I am concerned, though, that obviously that means this has to be a self-contained driveway for this project, which then is the same area that bikes and cars and pedestrians are all coming in, especially if there's no place to sit. So it's always going to be a walkable area, which is why I thought of a different way of walking across the street. You know, Thousand Oaks has created some junctions across Thousand Oaks Boulevard to kind of highlight areas so that people, when they're driving, don't necessarily go as fast or paying a little more attention. That was my idea for the diagonal thing, of just trying to create some kind of unique opportunity to make sure that everybody crosses in a way, because as we know, sometimes they don't go within the lines. But I think this is as good a resolution. I mean, when you go to Chick-fil-A, you have to cross from the parking lot to cross through the thing. So it's a common thing that does happen. So that doesn't necessarily bother me as much. It's just obviously if there's a way to designate things in a way so that people know where they're supposed to be, it just made me feel better. I think they did a good job in mitigating a lot of the traffic issues as much as possible, knowing that no building could be built on this without it being more than 5 feet. I mean, it pretty much says that we have to look at these setback variances, whatever the project's going to be, because there's really no way to build without that. And the other question is that, you know, and I always say this, we can't pick and choose winners and losers. Yeah, there's lots of different things that I would like it to be, but that's not really our job. We can't tell them, kind of like I was asking Mr. Niels, we can't tell them, hey, there's a code section that says we can stop you from opening this kind of business or whatever. Mr. Heeger pointed out that there's certain limitations, again, based on the type of business. That's not involved here. So we really can't say no just because it's something we don't like. Whether it is something we like or not, that's kind of a problem. I do like the fact that there was a lot less complaints, I think, this time from the community. Obviously, the people close by are most concerned about traffic and noise and stuff like that. That's clearly going to be an issue, and that's obviously a part of our concern. But I was happy to see it wasn't more broad in terms of its objection. I think a lot of people, as much as they have concerns, look at this as the best it can possibly be for this location, which I think is ultimately one of the things that really motivated me to say, you know, there's a lot of things that I wish they'd done differently or could do differently, but this is the best possible use of this property, especially considering it had been used before. It was a gas station. It was lots of things that Mr. Buss remembers from his past. It was a business at some point. So it's not like this is a brand new thing that nobody's ever realized there was a business here. It just hasn't been one for a long time. So I have no problem ultimately with their overriding concepts. I think it's the best use if we can get. I do like Commissioner Cohen's ideas with regard to adult landscaping. If we can get some in that way, it kind of creates more of that park feel than I think everybody at least was looking for. So those are my thoughts. Any other thoughts or a motion, Commissioner McMahon?
I agree with everything that has been said by my fellow commissioners. I still have an issue with the stacking. It just seems, I don't know, clumsy. However, if the mitigation for the excess noise from the speaker means that they will have to go out and take the orders by hand, perhaps if the stacking becomes an issue, they would have to go out and have orders taken by hand for both lanes. And I guess it's not going to kill this project for me. I think it is possibly as best as can be designed for this property, and I am in support of the project with a little.
Well, before you do a motion here, I think Mr. Nielsen had something to say, if that was what you were going to do.
No, I was just expressing my opinion. I hadn't thought about a motion yet.
Thank you, Chair Lanson. I just want to let the commission know I have been modifying its condition number 27 with some of the ideas that were being thrown out there. So in order to include its increase in the wall height from 6 feet to 8 feet and to mature landscaping, so I can include that into a condition. But as you're continuing to deliberate, so once you before you get to a motion, I am able to bring that up onto the screen so all the commissioners are able to see that condition with some of the proposed modifications to it.
And just so I'm clear, Mr. He here, to the extent that happens, we probably would have to reopen the public hearing to make sure the applicant was in agreement with that?
Yes, Chair Lanson. So I was waiting to see where you were going with this first before I jumped in to interrupt you guys. Two things. One is I believe the 8-foot height wall was actually mentioned during the discussion, and I believe I heard the applicant indicate that that wouldn't be a problem. They would be willing to accept that 8-foot wall. The mature landscaping is a different issue. If you look at the conditions 48 through 51, which talks about landscaping, this is a conceptual landscape plan, so it really hasn't been to a point approved by our landscape consultant or landscape team in the city. So we can try to modify a condition, certainly, but because if we want to modify a condition for landscaping, we would definitely have to open up the hearing again.
Okay, so let's get any other comments from commissioners, and then we can move forward with that concept.
All right, I'll speak one more time. I like Mr. Cohen's idea of raising the wall height 8 feet. I suspect that also may dampen the amount of sound coming from the speaker, which is an issue for a number of the people that spoke. And I think you guys have pretty much sold me on the idea that this may be the best project we can get into this space. And so yeah, I can be on board if we want to go ahead and open it back up and see if they want to landscape.
Aside from those two issues, the 10-foot wall or the 8-foot wall and the landscaping, is there any other things that we want to discuss as part of reopening the hearing?
The only other thing I would say is, but I didn't hear anybody come up with a solution, is I suspect there's going to be a higher percentage of pedestrian traffic there for see when the high school's in session, so roughly 186 days a year. But I don't think that anybody had a good answer for anything besides that one entry point right next to the power pole, unless you recall anything.
I don't, but at this point, let's go back and reopen the public hearing, and then Mr. Nielsen, why don't you address those issues?
Addressing for,
so no, the two issues that we were just talking about that you said that you've been.
Oh, so I have just been, if you'll bear with me, let me try and get a share screen. Here we are. So for this, I am utilizing its condition number 27. If I can zoom in. Basically, it's going over exterior building colors and materials. And the thought process is this condition we can actually insert. You can provide your modifications to the project just by adding onto that condition, modifying that condition. And effectively saying is that the project plan shall be updated to include the following, and it's to increase the wall height from 6 feet to 8 feet, and shall be of a split face concrete block wall. And so that can just be inserted into the actual, even though the applicant intends to do it, it is within the Planning Commission's right to actually identify that the type of material that's in there. And then the second bullet point that we can actually have is the applicant is encouraged to utilize mature landscaping when it's submitted for a landscape plan check.
Commissioner Cohen, is those the two things you had in mind?
It is, and instead of saying encourage, I'll say applicant is required to utilize mature landscaping under the discretion of the city landscape designer.
Mr. Heer, is that a sufficient addition?
Yes, I'm good with that. Thank you, Don.
All right, so identifying these.
Chair Lance, I do think because of this change, we need to have applicant understand it and confirm approval.
That's exactly where I was going. So Mr. Scribner and Mr. Megdal, looking at these two revisions, is this something that is acceptable to you?
Commissioner Lanson, I am happy to approve of these. Like I was saying, we're happy to be part of resolution and part of making this the best we can. And with the commissioner's insight, we'd be thrilled to do both of those.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nielsen, is there anything else we need to address as part of the public hearing process, or can I go ahead and close that now then?
We should be able to go ahead and close that because these were only the two items that I was hearing the Planning Commission mention.
All right, I will go ahead and again and reclose the public hearing part, and again and open it back up to commissioner comments or motion considering the now revision.
This is Commissioner Cohan. I'll go ahead and lead the motion. Again, I'd like to support this project and move forward that we approve development permit 2020-70307 and its corresponding conditions, including the changes to conditions. I don't have the condition number in front of me. The landscape proposed conditions and wall improvements. And I move that we approve the corresponding resolution.
Any other commissioner comments? I just want to add that I know a lot of the people will look at this and be frustrated again because of the fact of the noise and everything else. But I think as we've identified, the amount of accommodations that were worked out and have been further worked out as part of this process is pretty involved. And it's something that I think hopefully will set a precedent in terms of looking at lots of other types of projects. And with that, again, I want to say this is, I think, the best possible way of dealing with all of this. And I commend everybody for trying to get together to make sure it works. People that live nearby realize you still have an opportunity if there are issues that are a problem in terms of traffic and noise and stuff like that. Commissioner McMahon even pointed out we can have somebody stand out there and take an order. So there's lots of ways to make sure that you're still involved in this process. But again, I think it's the best we can possibly do. And I think I will go ahead and support the motion. So again, let's think of the comments.
I've got one more comment. One of the things that also for anybody out there that's frustrated with this one and concerned about the traffic, much as I am on Moore Park Road, I believe that it was stated by I can't remember who said, but one of the city employees, and I apologize for not remembering who you were, said that that issue can be addressed and will be required to be addressed by Starbucks if it becomes a concern.
Sounds good. With that, will the secretary please prepare us for a vote?
Commissioner Buss?
Aye.
Commissioner Cohan?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Chair Lanson?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. And that matter is approved. Going on to item 8, department reports. Mr. Kearns?
Thank you, Chair. We have none tonight.
Item 9, commission comments and AB 1234 reports.
Commissioner McMahon? In talking to staff recently, it was brought to my attention that the city parking studies, parking ordinances, parking requirements, I don't know the right term, hasn't been updated for a very long time. And things have changed in this world with Uber and Lyft and more people bicycling. I'm wondering if this is something we will look at, or the Traffic Commission will look at some point, is updating the parking requirements.
Okay.
McMahon, just really quick, are you referring to all parking or just like parking for residential uses, et cetera?
Just in general, parking,
Okay.
perhaps in the commercial and residential areas, because
Sure. I was going to say that obviously with assisted living, we've had that discussion a while back with about how much parking is required for an assisted living facility. Also, with the new housing laws, there's been some, especially with affordable housing, there's going to be some changes where they're limiting the amount of parking required, or it could be a density bonus that a developer can receive if you do affordable. So those are two aspects that are coming into play. But I understand what you're saying, and so it might be something that staff can look at as far as whether it's Traffic Commission or Planning Commission, something to look at.
thank you. I think it might be.
Any other commissioner comments or 1234 reports?
This is Commissioner Cohan. Just checking in with city staff on any new updates with the general plan, and are we expecting any additional workshops in the coming dates?
There will be additional meetings, stakeholder meetings. We don't have any on the horizon at the moment, but it's a busy time for the general plan, so there'll be a lot of work being performed in the next few months.
Well, that leads us into actually number 10, staff update. Mr. Kearns, any other updates?
We had an item, I identified the objective standards item was going to come forward on the 25th of this month. That has been pushed out to a date uncertain, so it requires a little bit further vetting and refinement. So it looks like the 25th meeting will be canceled, and the next meeting would be February 8th, and we're looking to have an item on that date.
So there would be an item on February 8th?
We're looking for an item, yeah, we have something that could be ready by then.
So I know then we have the reorganization on February 22nd, I believe.
That's correct.
Any other staff update or issues?
That is it, thank you.
I want to make sure I didn't close the meeting before there was any last minute things to discuss. With that, we will adjourn to possibly February 8th. Have a good night.
Night.
Night.